The night my life changed started with a watch that should not have existed. I was closing the library when a stranger walked in, placed an old silver pocket watch on the counter, and disappeared before I could ask a single question. My hand started shaking the second I opened it. It belonged to my father. The same father who supposedly died 12 years ago in a case connected to the Mafia. That night, black SUVs surrounded my apartment building. I thought I was being arrested. Instead, a tall man in a black suit stepped out of the lead vehicle. Damien Moretti. The most feared man in the city. His green eyes locked onto the watch in my hand. "That should have stayed buried," he said. An hour later, I was trapped inside his mansion. No locked chains. No threats. Just guards at every exit and one terrifying rule. I could not leave. I hated him immediately. My father had warned me about the Moretti family. Then I found something that changed everything. Hidden behind an old portrait was a secret room filled with documents, photographs, and a letter written by my father. But it was the photograph that shattered my world. My father was standing beside Damien. Not as enemies. As allies. I confronted Damien. He looked at the picture for a long time before speaking. "Your father did not die because of me," he said. "He died protecting you." I wanted to call him a liar. Then he handed me an audio recorder. "Listen." My father's voice filled the room. Older. Tired. Real. "If Clara ever hears this." My breath stopped. The person who betrayed me was never Damien. I stared at the recorder. Damien stared at me. And for the first time, I realized the man I feared most might be the only person telling me the truth. Some secrets do not stay buried. They wait for the right person to dig them up. I never expected that person to be me. My name is Clara Bennett, and for 12 years I believed I knew exactly how my father died. Everyone told me the same story. A dangerous investigation. The wrong people. A tragedy nobody could stop. I learned to live with that explanation because it was easier than asking questions nobody wanted to answer. By 24, my life had become small and predictable. I worked at a public library on the edge of Manhattan. I organized books. Helped students find research materials. Smiled at regular visitors. It was quiet. Safe. The kind of life my father would have wanted for me. At least that was what I told myself. The evening everything changed started like any other. Rain tapped softly against the library windows while I pushed a cart of returned books through the nearly empty building. The old clock above the entrance read 8:47 p.m. We closed in 13 minutes. I was already thinking about leftovers in my refrigerator and the detective novel waiting on my nightstand when the front door opened. A man stepped inside. He wore a dark coat and kept his head lowered. Something about him immediately felt strange. Not threatening. Just deliberate. Like he had come for one specific reason. He did not browse the shelves. He did not ask a question. He walked straight to the circulation desk where I was sorting returns. Then he placed a small object on the counter between us. A silver pocket watch. My breath caught instantly. I knew that watch. Every scratch. Every dent. Every detail. My father carried it every day of his life. I had not seen it since the week of his funeral. My hands trembled as I reached for it. "Where did you get this?" I asked. The man looked at me for the first time. His expression revealed nothing. Ask the man who buried the truth. Then he turned and walked away. By the time I reached the front doors, he was gone. The street outside was empty except for the rain. I stood there frozen, clutching the watch in my hand. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Inside the cover was an engraving I knew by memory. To Clara. Always keep looking forward. Dad. The message blurred as tears filled my eyes. This was impossible. 12 years. 12 years without a single clue. Then suddenly my father's watch appeared on my counter. I closed the library in a daze and carried the watch home. The rain had grown heavier by the time I reached my apartment building. That was when I saw them. 3 black SUVs parked along the curb. Their engines running. Their windows dark. The moment I stepped onto the sidewalk, a tall man in a black suit emerged from the lead vehicle. Even from 30 feet away, his presence felt impossible to ignore. Sharp features. Dark hair. Green eyes colder than the rain. Damien Moretti. The name my father once warned me never to forget. His gaze dropped to the pocket watch in my hand. Then he said 5 words that changed everything. That watch should have stayed buried. The rain suddenly felt colder. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, clutching my father's pocket watch while Damien Moretti stared at me from beneath the glow of a street lamp. Water rolled from the edges of his black coat. The city moved around us. Cars passed. Traffic lights changed. People hurried home beneath umbrellas. Yet somehow everything felt distant. Like the entire world had narrowed to the space between us. "What did you say?" I asked. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted. Damien's eyes never left the watch. That watch disappeared 12 years ago. My grip tightened. It belonged to my father. I know exactly who it belonged to. Something in the way he said it made my stomach twist. He was not guessing. He knew. Before I could ask another question, one of the SUV doors opened behind him. A man stepped out and approached quietly. He leaned toward Damien and said something I could not hear. Damien's expression hardened immediately. Then he looked back at me. "You cannot stay here tonight." I almost laughed. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." The arrogance in his voice instantly reignited my anger. For years I had imagined what I would say if I ever met a man like Damien Moretti. None of those imagined conversations involved him ordering me around. I do not take instructions from strangers. A faint smile appeared. It was not friendly. That would be more convincing if you were not holding something people have been searching for. My pulse skipped. What people? Damien ignored the question. Instead, he stepped closer. Not threatening. Not aggressive. Just close enough that I could clearly see the rain on his coat and the exhaustion hidden behind his eyes. "Clara." Hearing my name from him felt wrong. "You have no idea what that watch means." "Then explain it." Silence. For one brief second something flashed across his face. Regret. Then it disappeared. "Not here." I stared at him. Every instinct told me to walk away. To go upstairs. Lock my apartment door. Pretend none of this had happened. But my father's watch was suddenly back in my life after 12 years. And standing in front of me was the one man connected to every unanswered question. "You expect me to trust you?" Damien looked toward my apartment building. Then back at me. "No." The answer surprised me. "I expect you to want the truth more than your pride." Rain continued falling between us. My heart hammered against my ribs. Finally, I asked the question I had carried since childhood. "Did you know my father?" Damien's jaw tightened. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he nodded once. "Better than you realize." My breath caught. The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Before I could respond, headlights appeared at the end of the street. Another black vehicle turned the corner and slowed. Damien noticed it immediately. Whatever calm he had been maintaining vanished. Not fear. Concern. He looked directly at me. "You need to come with me now." I shook my head. "I am not getting into one of your cars." "Clara." His voice lowered. Serious. Urgent. "If your father were standing here tonight, he would tell you to do exactly that." Then he opened his coat pocket and pulled out a faded photograph. The moment I saw it, my breath stopped. My father was in the picture. And he was standing beside Damien Moretti. For a second, I forgot about the rain. I forgot about the black SUVs, the strangers, and the cold knot of fear sitting in my chest. All I could see was the photograph trembling in Damien Moretti's hand. My father stood beside him. Not across from him. Not chasing him. Not confronting him. Beside him. They looked younger. Serious. Focused. And impossibly familiar. The image shattered 12 years of assumptions in a single heartbeat. "That is not possible," I whispered. Damien held the photograph steady. "It is." I took it from him with shaking hands. The picture felt old. Worn around the edges. Real. There was no mistaking my father. The same eyes. The same posture. The same faint crease in his forehead when he was concentrating. I had spent years staring at family albums. I knew every photograph that existed. Yet I had never seen this one. "Where did you get it?" I asked. "Your father gave it to me." The answer hit harder than I expected. Rain continued falling around us while traffic rolled past in the distance. The city seemed unaware that my entire understanding of the past was collapsing. Why would he do that? Damien looked toward the dark street before answering. Because he trusted me. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it sounded absurd. "My father hated people like you." Damien's expression remained calm. "Your father hated dishonest people. There is a difference." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him he was lying. But the photograph remained in my hands, refusing to cooperate with the story I had believed for 12 years. One of the men near the SUV approached again. This time his voice was urgent. Damien listened carefully, then nodded. Whatever was happening, it clearly mattered. When the man walked away, Damien looked directly at me. "You need to make a decision." "What decision?" "Come with me or stay here." I crossed my arms. "That sounds simple." "It is." "No, it is not." My voice rose before I could stop it. "You appear out of nowhere, tell me you knew my father, hand me a photograph that makes no sense, and now you expect me to trust you?" Damien studied me quietly. The rain glistened on his dark hair. "No," he said. "I expect you to trust your father." Silence followed. Those words landed differently. More carefully. More painfully. Because deep down, I trusted my father more than anyone. Even now. Even after 12 years. Damien glanced at the pocket watch still clutched in my hand. That watch was never supposed to resurface. Why? His eyes darkened slightly. Because the moment it did, certain people would know someone started asking questions again. My stomach tightened. What people? The same people your father spent years trying to expose. Before I could respond, lightning flashed across the clouds above Manhattan. The brief light illuminated Damien's face. For the first time, I noticed something unexpected. He looked tired. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone carrying a burden for far too long. Then he opened the rear door of the SUV and said something that made my heart stop. "The answers you want are inside my mansion. And your father left them there himself." Every instinct told me to walk away. To return to my apartment, lock the door, and pretend none of this was happening. But the problem with secrets is that once they crack open, they refuse to close again. I stood in the rain staring at the open SUV door while my father's pocket watch felt heavier in my hand than it should have. Damien Moretti waited without pressuring me. Somehow that made the decision harder. Finally, I stepped forward. The moment I sat inside, the door closed softly behind me. The vehicle pulled away from the curb and disappeared into the wet Manhattan night. Nobody spoke during the drive. Rain streaked across the windows while city lights blurred into gold and white ribbons. I sat across from Damien, holding the photograph and the watch, trying to understand how my life had changed so completely in less than an hour. "How far is this mansion?" I asked. "About 40 minutes. And I am supposed to believe my father left answers there?" Damien looked out the window before answering. "You do not have to believe me. That is convenient." A faint smile touched his face. "You are exactly like him." The comment caught me off guard. "You keep saying things like that." "Because they are true." I looked away. For years, memories of my father had been frozen in place. The stories people told. The photographs in old albums. The quiet sadness that followed his name. Now a stranger seemed to know a version of him I had never seen. The thought made me uncomfortable. The city slowly disappeared behind us. Buildings became larger. Roads quieter. Trees replaced storefronts. By the time the SUV turned through a pair of massive iron gates, the rain had almost stopped. The estate beyond them looked less like a home and more like something from another century. Stone walls. Towering windows. Long pathways lined with lanterns glowing softly in the darkness. I stared through the glass. "You live here?" "Unfortunately." The answer surprised me enough that I almost laughed. The mansion rose from the hillside like a fortress. Beautiful. Isolated. Impossible to ignore. As we approached the entrance, I noticed something strange. Security cameras covered nearly every angle of the property. Guards stood near several buildings. Not aggressive. Watchful. The entire estate felt protected. Or trapped. I could not decide which. The front doors opened before we reached them. Warm light spilled into the night. Inside, polished marble reflected crystal chandeliers overhead. The air smelled faintly of cedar wood and old books. Everything felt elegant. Timeless. Yet beneath the luxury, I sensed something else. History. Secrets. The kind that lived inside walls for decades. Damien led me through a series of hallways lined with paintings and antique furniture. Several staff members nodded respectfully as we passed. None of them looked surprised to see me. That realization sent a chill through me. They knew I was coming. Damien did not deny it. "Yes." "Why?" He stopped walking. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he opened a pair of dark wooden doors and stepped aside. Beyond them was a private study filled with bookshelves stretching to the ceiling. A fire crackled softly in the fireplace. On the desk sat a single sealed envelope. My name was written across the front in my father's handwriting. For several seconds, I could not breathe. The study disappeared around me. The fireplace. The bookshelves. The rain tapping softly against distant windows. None of it mattered. All I could see was my name written in my father's handwriting across the front of that envelope. 12 years. 12 years since I had seen those careful letters. My hand shook as I stepped closer to the desk. "This is not possible," I whispered. Damien remained near the doorway. He did not move. He did not interrupt. "Open it," he said quietly. I looked at him. "How long has this been here?" 12 years. The answer sent a chill through me. "You kept it for 12 years? I promised I would." I stared at the envelope again. Part of me wanted to open it immediately. Another part was terrified of what waited inside. What if everything I believed about my father was wrong? What if the truth hurt more than the mystery? Finally, I slid my finger beneath the seal. The paper opened with a soft crackle. Inside was a single handwritten letter. I recognized the handwriting instantly. "Dear Clara." The room blurred. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. I swallowed hard and continued reading. "If you are reading this, then something has happened that I hoped never would. It means the watch has resurfaced. It means certain people have started looking again. Most importantly, it means you have met Damien Moretti. My heart stopped. I looked up at Damien. He stood silently beside the bookshelves, his expression unreadable. I lowered my eyes back to the letter. I know what people will tell you about him. I know what they will want you to believe. But if circumstances force you to choose, trust Damien before you trust anyone else connected to my case. The words felt impossible. My father had written them. Not someone pretending to be him. Not a forgery. Him. I continued reading. The truth about my death was never simple. There are people who benefited from keeping it hidden. Some of them are closer than you think. Do not assume family means loyalty. My stomach tightened. Family. The word echoed inside my mind. My aunt had raised me after my father's death. She had answered every question. She had protected me. Had she not? I turned the page. At the bottom was a sentence written more heavily than the others, as though he wanted to make certain I would never forget it. The answers are hidden where the portrait watches the door. I frowned. What does that mean? Damien finally stepped forward. I was hoping you could tell me. I lowered the letter. You do not know? For the first time since meeting him, Damien looked genuinely frustrated. Your father never explained that part. Silence settled over the study. The fire crackled softly behind us. Then something caught my eye. Hanging above the fireplace was a massive oil portrait of an older man. Unlike the others in the mansion, it was positioned at an unusual angle. Facing directly toward the entrance. Watching the door. My pulse quickened. Slowly, I looked from the portrait back to the letter in my hands. Then I noticed something neither of us had seen before. A small brass key had slipped from the folded pages and landed on the desk. The small brass key seemed impossibly ordinary. That was what made it frightening. 12 years of secrets. A handwritten letter from my father. A hidden message. And somehow the next piece of the puzzle fit into the palm of my hand. I picked it up carefully. The metal felt cold against my skin. Damien stepped closer and examined it without touching it. Have you seen it before? He asked. I shook my head. Never. The fire crackled softly behind us. Outside, rain continued tapping against the windows of the mansion. Everything felt strangely quiet, as if the entire estate were holding its breath. I looked from the key to the portrait above the fireplace. The older man in the painting stared toward the study entrance with a stern expression. Watching the door. Just like my father had written. The answers are hidden where the portrait watches the door. I repeated the words slowly. Then something clicked. The portrait. Not the room. The portrait itself. My pulse quickened. I stepped onto the stone hearth and moved closer. Up close, the frame appeared older than the painting. Heavy. Handcrafted. One corner seemed slightly worn, as if someone had touched it many times over the years. Damien noticed it too. There. I reached toward the edge of the frame. Hidden beneath a carved section of wood was a tiny keyhole. For a moment neither of us moved. Then I inserted the brass key. A soft metallic click echoed through the study. Silence followed. Nothing happened. Then a faint sound came from behind the wall. The portrait shifted less than an inch. My breath caught. Damien carefully moved the frame aside. Behind it was a narrow compartment built into the stone. Inside sat a weathered leather box covered in dust. My hands trembled as I lifted it free. It was surprisingly heavy. The kind of weight created by years of unanswered questions. We carried it to the desk. I opened the lid slowly. Inside were photographs, documents, handwritten notes, and a small cassette recorder. My heart raced. The first photograph showed my father standing beside Damien. Not once. Multiple times. Different locations. Different years. Every image told the same story. They had worked together. The realization hit me harder than anything else. My father had trusted him. The second item was a folder filled with investigation notes. Names. Dates. Financial records. Connections between people I did not recognize. Then I saw one name that made my stomach drop. My aunt. I stared at the page, certain I had read it wrong. She was listed repeatedly throughout the documents. Not as a witness. Not as family. As someone involved. No, I whispered. That cannot be right. Damien looked at the file. His expression darkened. Not surprise. Recognition. As though he had feared this moment all along. Slowly, I reached for the cassette recorder. Attached to it was a label written in my father's handwriting. For Clara. Listen only when you are ready to learn who betrayed us. My hands would not stop shaking. The cassette recorder sat on the desk between Damien and me like it carried the weight of an entire lifetime. Maybe it did. The label stared back at me. For Clara. Listen only when you are ready to learn who betrayed us. I wanted answers. I had wanted them for 12 years. Yet suddenly I was afraid of finding them. The study felt smaller than before. The fire crackled softly behind us. Rain tapped against the windows. Somewhere deep inside the mansion, an old clock marked the passing minutes. Everything felt painfully quiet. You already knew about my aunt, did you not? I asked. Damien did not answer immediately. His silence told me enough. I suspected, he finally said. Your father suspected too. I looked down at the documents spread across the desk. My aunt's name appeared again and again. Notes. Dates. Financial transfers. Meetings. Information I could barely process. The woman who raised me after my father died. The woman who packed my school lunches. The woman who sat in the front row at every graduation ceremony. None of it made sense. No. I shook my head. There has to be another explanation. Damien's expression softened slightly. That is exactly what your father said the first time he found her name. The words hit me harder than I expected. My father had stood where I was standing now. Faced the same disbelief. The same refusal to accept what was in front of him. Slowly, I reached for the cassette recorder. The plastic felt old beneath my fingers. I pressed play. Static filled the room. For a moment I thought the tape had been damaged by time. Then a familiar voice emerged through the crackling sound. My father's voice. Older than I remembered. Tired. Careful. Real. My eyes filled instantly. Clara, he said. If you are hearing this, then Damien kept his promise. I looked toward Damien. He lowered his gaze without speaking. The recording continued. You are probably angry. Confused. Maybe both. I wish I could explain everything in person. The tape hissed softly. Then came a long pause. The hardest part of this investigation was not discovering strangers could lie. It was discovering people I loved could do the same. My chest tightened. I already knew where this was heading. I just did not want to hear it. Your aunt was never the mastermind, my father continued. But she helped hide the truth because she believed she was protecting you. I stared at the recorder. Every emotion inside me collided at once. Relief. Betrayal. Sadness. Confusion. Then my father's voice dropped even lower. The person truly responsible was someone neither of us suspected until it was almost too late. My breath caught. Damien straightened immediately. Even he had not expected that. The tape crackled again. Then my father spoke a name. The moment I heard it, the room seemed to stop moving. The name echoed through the study like a door opening into a room I never knew existed. For several seconds, I could not move. I could not think. I simply stared at the cassette recorder while my father's voice faded into a wall of static. Damien looked just as stunned. Whatever name we had heard, neither of us had expected it. The recording continued. If you are hearing this, Clara, then I was right. The truth survived longer than the lies. My hands tightened around the edge of the desk. Every memory from the last 12 years felt unstable. Every story I had been told suddenly demanded to be questioned. My father paused on the tape before speaking again. The person responsible never wanted power. They wanted control. That is what made them dangerous. The fire crackled softly behind us. Outside, the storm had finally begun to fade. Moonlight filtered through the tall windows of the study, casting silver shadows across the floor. I listened carefully, afraid to miss a single word. I trusted the wrong people, my father said. But I also trusted the right one. My eyes lifted toward Damien. He remained silent, his expression unreadable. Damien Moretti was never my enemy. If anything happened to me, I knew he would protect what mattered most. Emotion caught in my throat. 12 years of anger had been built on a foundation that no longer existed. The tape clicked briefly before continuing. There is one final piece of evidence. I hid it where nobody would think to look. It proves everything. My pulse quickened. Damien stepped closer to the recorder. Where, he whispered, as if my father could somehow answer. Then the recording did. Look inside the chapel. I frowned. There is a chapel here? Damien nodded slowly. An old one. It has been closed for years. The tape continued. Beneath the third pew, you will find what I could not risk keeping with me. Then the recording ended. Silence filled the room. No static. No voice. Nothing. I stared at the recorder while my father's final words repeated inside my mind. Beneath the third pew. Damien exhaled slowly. I searched every room in this mansion except the chapel. Why? He looked toward the window. Because your father told me never to enter it unless you were standing beside me. The answer sent a chill through me. For 12 years he had kept that promise. 12 years. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then a sharp knock sounded against the study door. One of Damien's security men entered. His face was pale. Concerned. Sir, he said quietly. You need to see this. Damien took the tablet being offered to him. His expression immediately darkened. My stomach tightened. What is it? He turned the screen toward me. A security camera image filled the display. The front gates of the estate. And standing outside them was someone I recognized instantly. My aunt. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it. The image on the security screen showed my aunt standing alone outside the front gates of the estate. Moonlight reflected off the wet pavement around her. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Tired. Yet somehow seeing her there felt more unsettling than everything that had happened inside the mansion. My pulse hammered against my ribs. She is here, I whispered. Damien remained silent. His eyes stayed fixed on the screen. How did she know where I was? The question hung in the air. Nobody answered it. One of the security men shifted uncomfortably. She has been asking for Miss Bennett by name. I stared at the image. Part of me wanted to run outside immediately. This was the woman who raised me. The woman who sat beside my hospital bed when I was sick. The woman who taught me how to drive and attended every school event. Another part of me remembered the documents hidden inside the wall. The names. The records. The warnings in my father's letter. Damien finally looked at me. The decision is yours. What does that mean? It means I will not make it for you. His voice remained calm. If you want to see her, I will allow it. Allow it. A few hours earlier, that phrase would have infuriated me. Now it barely registered. Too much had changed. I looked down at my father's letter still resting on the desk. Trust Damien before you trust anyone else connected to my case. The words echoed through my mind. Slowly, I exhaled. Bring her in. 20 minutes later, the study door opened. My aunt stepped inside. For a second neither of us moved. The firelight illuminated her face. She looked exhausted. Her eyes immediately filled with tears when she saw me. Clara. Hearing my name in her voice almost broke me. She took a step forward. Then stopped when she noticed Damien standing nearby. The room became painfully quiet. Finally, she looked at me and said the words I never expected to hear. I am sorry. Tears gathered in her eyes. I should have told you the truth years ago. I felt my throat tighten. Why did you not? She looked down at her hands. Because your father asked me to protect you. I froze. What? She nodded slowly. He knew the investigation was becoming dangerous. He believed that if you learned too much too soon, you would spend your life chasing answers instead of living it. My heart ached. Everything felt upside down. My aunt glanced toward the cassette recorder on the desk. Then toward the hidden documents. She understood immediately. You found everything. Not everything, Damien said quietly. My aunt looked at him. For the first time that night, neither of them appeared angry. Just tired. Like two people carrying the same burden for too many years. Then she reached into her purse and removed a sealed envelope. She placed it carefully on the desk beside my father's letter. There is one thing your father never left here. My pulse quickened. What is it? She looked directly at me. The final proof. I stared at the envelope while the room fell silent once more. Then I noticed something written across the front in my father's handwriting. Open only after the truth finds you.